So this is a new Senate district. It encompasses 1/3 of South Forsyth, 1/3 of North Fulton, and 1/3 of Northwest Gwinnett. So unincorporated Forsyth County south of the Cumming City line. On the North Fulton side, Johns Creek, Lake Windward, part of Alpharetta. And then on the Gwinnett side, Suwannee, Sugar Hill, and Buford, all the way up to Buford Dam. It also encompasses about 14 of the Chattahoochee River. I own a swimming pool construction company. My good friend Mark Thompson out there, he and I have been working together for about 15 years. If y'all know Mark and what a great job he does, we're close partners in what we do. So that's my day job. I'm the father of 3 beautiful teenage daughters, so pray for me at night when you think about that. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative-elect Cox, do you mind sharing a little about yourself?
Yeah, I'm representing District 28, which is the northeast part of Forsyth County. Encompasses the city of Cumming, Sawney Mountain, goes across Lake Lanier into Hall County, so part of the lake community. Senator-elect Still did not mention his, is it Ecuador?
Yes.
His Ecuador, what is it?
I have a Eco Lodge and Nature Preserve.
His Eco Lodge and Nature Preserve. He did not mention that to y'all. And I just wanted to let you know that he had that. We own a dog. So we're here to support the district. And I want y'all to know that cybersecurity is something that I'm pretty passionate about and what it will encompass, as well as our natural resources in the state of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited to introduce Representative-elect Carter Barrett, who is my representative at my house, meaning you're mine now. So, and my friend, tell us about yourself.
Well, most importantly, I'm glad that I am yours and you are mine. I know pretty much everybody in here. I've been in Forsyth County since June 1990. I've watched the county grow and change and evolve, and have just tried to be very active. I've had a great life in this community. It's been so good to me and my family, but this is absolutely the greatest honor ever to get to represent y'all at the Capitol and this great state. So I'm tickled to death, and thank you for allowing me to be up here to represent y'all.
Thank you, Carter. Please join me in thanking all of them for sharing their time and their passion for our community and support. All right, so now we're going to shift to the questions that you've submitted via the registration process. You can also use the QR code on the back of your program or the screen to submit your questions for the legislators. If you prefer to handwrite your question, please raise your hand and a staff member will come and take it and bring it up here to me. So first question, Senator Dolezal. I got too many things up here. Bear with me one second. We are currently in the heart of Georgia's technology corridor. Thank you, and thank you to the other members of the delegation for that designation. As chair of the Senate Committee on Science and Technology, can you speak to any legislation or initiatives to help attract more industry and science and technology to the state of Georgia?
That's a great question. One of the things I'm most excited about with this delegation that we have at the table here, is this working? No. Use this. Oh, got it.
We started a technology question, but I can't figure out what there you go. I was saying that one of the things I'm most excited about this delegation moving forward in the next session is that we have a lot of people who have experience in technology. And it's critically important not only to our state, but specifically to this region. And that is why we moved that naming forward, recognizing this is a technology corridor. When I was a freshman 4 years ago, we had 0.5% of high school graduates in the state of Georgia had completed a computer science course. 0.5%. So we passed Senate Bill 108, which made computer science courses accessible to all middle school and high school students in the state of Georgia. That was a priority coming out of Lieutenant Governor's first year. And so I feel like this is not working. Is that?
It is.
Okay, perfect. We formed the Partnership for Inclusive Innovation, and that is a statewide effort to give everyone access not only to technology, but to capital, because ultimately it doesn't matter this technology skills that we have if there's not investment to follow along with that. Last year, we passed an apprenticeship program that partnered with schools like this in the technical college system of Georgia to allow up to $10,000 apprenticeships to local businesses. So how does that work? The state will come behind. If you were to hire an apprentice in the 17 high demand career opportunities within the state of Georgia, which includes things like aerospace, IT, healthcare, all things related to technology, the state will fund $10,000 of that apprenticeship. What does it mean locally though? And I think that this is, honestly, this is something more that we would lean on our local elected officials for than it would necessarily the state delegation. Investment is going to follow quality of life, and entrepreneurship, location follows quality of life. So yes, we can lower the state income tax, which we should do. We can create a low regulatory environment, which we should do. But we need to keep our schools phenomenal. We need to keep our parks and recs phenomenal. We need to have a diversity of housing, everything from executive housing to workforce housing. And so I think that what we've seen, not only in Forsyth County, but in Alpharetta and Milton, is local elected officials who have done a phenomenal job doing those things, which ultimately has led to business owners wanting to live here. And the next generation business owner tends to have some tie to technology, which is why I think you've seen the growth in that area. So what do we do moving forward? We keep doing more of the same in all of those areas.
Thank you. This one is for all members of our delegation. Georgia remains the #1 place to do business for an unprecedented 9 years in a row. That doesn't happen by accident. What initiatives will you continue to champion to help our state retain that designation? Any takers? On to the next question. I'm just kidding.
I don't want to take all the time up from the local delegation. I think the battery.
That's good. You good? We protected y'all from the speakers.
Yeah, so becoming the #1 state to do business isn't something that you do every day. Obviously, there's 50 states now. Some presidents think there's 54 states, but there's 50. But we've done good. You know, we've done #1 state for 9 years in a row, and I think that's a track record that leads back 20 years ago. It's not something that any of us did single-handedly. It's nothing that your local governments did by themselves. We did it as a team, but we started 20 years ago when the Republicans took over the control of the state in the governor's office and the legislature. And it's through good tax policy, good conservative fiscal management of our state's resources and local government resources as well. We have a lot of good other factors. We have good education. We have good transportation investment. We continue to put money into that infrastructure year after year after year. And we have a good climate. We have a good business climate. We have a good economic climate. But we've got to continue to invest in our infrastructure. We can't sit on our laurels, as the governor uses the term all the time. We have to continue to invest in education, our parks, our water and sewer infrastructure. Those are things that are important. So we continue to be #1 in the country. Other states emulate us. They want to come see what we've done well so they can go back and copy that in their states. So we'll have to continue to work on that. Our AAA bond rating is important. I think there's only 6 other states that have a bond rating like ours, and we protect that at all costs. We have a $6 billion surplus today in the bank, and we're going to give back some of that to the taxpayers next year. And so other states are jealous and envious of what we've done here, but it's because of good leadership over the last 20 years that's got us really going.
Thank you. Representative McDonald, as floor leader for Governor Kemp, can you provide a preview of any legislative initiatives being tackled in the first year of Governor Kemp's next 4-year term?
Yes, first of all, I want to, on behalf of Chairman Rick Jaspers, he is not able to be here with us. He is a new member of our delegation. He's chairman of our House Transportation. He represents the northwest part of our county and part of Cherokee and all of Pickens. So he also has one of these events this morning in a district that he represents almost 90% of. So he does send his regrets in regards to the citizens of Forsyth County that can't be here. As far as the governor, we're very fortunate to have the governor that we do have. I think he is the best governor in the nation of these 50 states. And I was very fortunate last year to be tapped to be one of his floor leaders. and carry some of the big initiatives was just public safety package last year. I carried reduction in the gas tax through committee, and another 4 leader carried it on the House floor. So it was a lot that we did to protect Georgia citizens and also to give back to Georgia citizens. This year, going to do a lot of the same as we read the AJC or listen to the news. We do have a problem in our capital city. It's with gangs, and I feel safe with our borders here because we have the sheriff that we have. It's still, if you follow the recent news, the murder in Buckhead, the person that did it went back to the cab to where they lived. And that's our borders, we got to protect that. And I think the governor's going to have some gang initiatives. I think the fight that the First Lady of Georgia with human trafficking is still going to continue with the airport that we have, the world's largest airport. That's a hub for human trafficking. So a lot of efforts going to continue with that. And of course, some tax policy that the governor's going to be working. So those are some key things that we're already discussing. They don't tell everything, not even to me. So it's kind of, I'll show up, they'll say, go get this done, like he did with Save Girl Sports last year. So, all I can do is carry his water, and I enjoy representing each and every one of you in Atlanta.
Thank you. So this one's for anybody. Lieutenant Governor Duncan is leaving the state and going back to private business. Through his stated vision of Georgia becoming the Silicon Valley of the East Coast, will we lose that initiative? And if not, what can be done to keep that vision alive? Y'all are so polite to each other.
So I appreciate the current Lieutenant Governor's vision in terms of Silicon Valley of the East. I do think in many ways, like Leader Gooch said, that was picked up from previous leadership. We appreciate the fact that he carried that banner. But I believe that the momentum towards us becoming Silicon Valley of the East still is there. But I would caution all of us on the following things. When you think about becoming Silicon Valley of the East, what you will find in the, I'll say the original Silicon Valley is this: yes, and. You never hear no but. The cultural challenge that we have here in Atlanta, and just Metro Atlanta and Georgia itself, really comes down to, do we have the workforce? Yes. Can we develop it better? Absolutely. Do we have the capital flowing in that we need to? Probably not as much as we do, probably not as much as required to continue that momentum. But I think there's a way for us to funnel that capital into here, maybe through citizens of Georgia or basically throughout the entire United States. But I think the biggest hindrance to us continuing the momentum around us becoming the Silicon Valley of the East really just comes down to culture. There are so many times where I'm at an event like this, or I'm speaking, and we talk about failure. And then that becomes the immediate scarlet letter of somebody. The challenge is if you go to the original Silicon Valley, it is literally littered with people who, quote, have failed, and I'm putting that in quotes, but yet turned around and created a unicorn. For those of you who don't know what a unicorn is, that's $1 billion business. So I would ask that as you're thinking about us carrying that banner, us maintaining that momentum, absolutely be thinking about the places where the technical colleges can help us in workforce. Think about the places where all the higher education universities can assist us, except for maybe that one in Athens. Think about what it is that we can do with the capital flow that comes in. But probably most important, and I mean this, most importantly, ask yourself this: what is the last company that we have founded, we have nurtured to $1 billion, and has stayed in Georgia? I would argue it's Home Depot. It's been way too long since we actually founded one, nurtured one, brought it to $1 billion, and they didn't leave, or they weren't bought by someone outside of our state. So if we want to become the Silicon Valley of the East, it really comes down to how it is that we can, in a sense, improve the culture here in terms of saying we can, we will, and yes, and, but not no but.
What was the visioning of the state reps in going against the district maps approved unanimously by our Board of Education and Board of Commissioners? And what do you think the benefit is to the county? This is a two-part question. Do you feel this process should be changed to engage our citizens' input in the future?
So When you think about that process, it's a once in a decade process. There is absolutely going to be, I'll say, difference of opinion. I think the best solutions in life are due to people coming together and finding a way to solve a problem. And if all there is in that room is yes, then you're basically in an echo chamber. The best solutions in life, may they be business, may they be redistricting, may they be just with your family, really comes down to conflict. And I mean measured conflict, cordial conflict, and being able to come up with a solution that works. So I think at the end of the day, I think that's exactly what occurred in many ways. Sometimes it didn't. But I do believe now, I think we have found a path forward. And I do believe that we need to stick with, I'll say, the once in a decade. Our Constitution lays that out pretty well, and I think we'll stick with that.
I personally am a fan of Pat Lencioni, who talks a lot about healthy conflict. I recommend any of his books. The sudden passing of House Speaker David Ralston has created a shuffling of many leadership positions under the Gold Dome. What are some of the long-term impacts of the changing of the guard?
It was a sad day in Georgia that we lost a statesman, a gentleman that served this state for 25 plus years, not only in the Senate but also in the House. And of course, as I've always said, speakers, but you look back at Speaker Tom Murphy and then there was a couple speakers in between, and of course David Ralston was speaking for 13 years. I think you're going to see even shelf lives of speakers even shrink because of just the changing of Georgia, the changing of districts. But for us in the House with Todd and Carter and Brent, myself, it is a new day. The whole leadership changed from the top down. But we got some youth in there, which I was excited. We've got Chuck Efstration, who's a lawyer from Gwinnett that's been chairman of Judy, that's going to be our majority leader. Majority whip was unchallenged. It's James Burchett. He's from the southern part of the state. And then we've got our caucus chairs from the middle part of the state, Bruce Williamson, and one of the youngest members of our House is Houston Gaines. I think is he 21 yet? I think he's just right out of college, but no, Houston's a bright and shining star. He's from Athens, Georgia. I said from Athens, Georgia.
In Greece.
Yes. And he will do really well as our vice caucus chair. So our speaker, John Burns, has a great team around. Speaker-elect John Burns has a great team around him. The great part of the process that's happened is we got our 74th speaker as our first female speaker in the history of Georgia with Jan Jones. Jan's a neighbor here. Jan's good to all of us. So she's been there and she's doing great in this transition. And come January, we'll get to vote on who will lead us for the next 2 years. We do everything on a biennial cycle. All bills that did not make it across the finish line last year, they all die and they can be resubmitted the first this year. So it's a new 2 years for us. We kind of reset not only with legislation, we reset with leadership this time. And I'm sure the same question it's going to affect over in the Senate too with new leadership. We've got great leadership. Even one of our own, Steve Gooch, is now the majority leader. So we've got a good team to work with on both sides of the aisle, and I see great things coming for the citizens of Georgia.
Thank you. In a related question, with a new leader in the Senate and a new leader in the House, what does this mean for legislation that was in process but didn't make crossover day in the previous session? Will those bills die on the vine, or will they be picked up where they left off?
Real quickly, the session that ended in April, all bills that did not pass by signing tonight are dead anyway, regardless of new leadership. We have a whole new term of office beginning January 1st. All of us will be sworn in to a new term of office. And so all of the bills that passed can be reintroduced exactly like they were, or with any modifications that we choose. So just because the bill didn't pass last year doesn't mean it can't be reintroduced again year after year after year after year. So all those bills can be put back in the hopper. They'll have to go through the process of a hearing, committee work, get vetted properly by the House, and then it comes over to the Senate where we perfect their legislation. Is that right, guys?
Yes, sir.
They agree.
Yes.
Leader in the Senate, majority leader, is that anyone we know by any chance? Senator Steve Gooch over there is our majority leader in the Senate.
Thank you. Let's see. What initiatives does the delegation foresee beginning or continuing in order to support our Georgia-grown businesses?
Yeah. House Bill 1150 is the Freedom to Farm Act, and that was big. Let me get this. That was big for us this session. I mean, the number one industry in Georgia is agriculture. You look around, our state is we're compacted here in this metro area, but I just drove down to Americus, Georgia this week, and we have a beautiful state. Got some beautiful land, a lot of hard workers. And what the Freedom to Farm Act did, it protects these farmers for people coming in, moving next to a farm and saying, I don't like the farm anymore. It helps them protect their farm, lets them continue to farm. I spoke to the Farm Bureau 2 weeks ago, and the Kennemore family, who has property just south of here, they've been farming in this area generationally. And of course, with all the growth around, it just became hard to do it in that area. But they still wanted to farm. And so they have moved their operations somewhere else up in the northern area of the county or into Dawson County. But farmers are passionate about what they do. And this bill 1150, it protects them. Also, this past year during COVID, I got to participate with the governor at the Atlanta Food Bank. It's an unbelievable facility down off 285 west of the city. And a lot of the CARES money that was given to the state of Georgia went to our farmers to buy their product and to help our own Georgians put food on their table. So there's a lot that has gone on with our farmers. They're passionate about what they do, again, as I said, and we got to protect the number one industry and number one crop in Georgia is farming.
So real quick, sorry, but I think it's pretty important. Lauren and I, we have coffee every morning, and obviously our new colleagues are welcome. But we have coffee every morning with about 6 folks from Southern Georgia. And we learn, I know I do, I learn a lot about basically an industry I knew nothing about. I've never lived in a farming community, but the feeling was it is the number one GDP driver. And for us to not at least have a good understanding about what they face in terms of challenges, we felt as if, hey, a cup of coffee for an hour a day actually starts to give it to us. But going back to that Silicon Valley of the East, you'd be surprised how much tech now is going into agriculture, how much drone technology is going into agriculture, how much infrared, you name it, algorithms, etc. So if you do have someone in your house or someone in your family who's interested in tech, please don't think it has to be social media or something, quote, that you're finding in Google. It could be something where, you know what, they're jumping into the number one industry in our state, and it's pretty darn cool. Well,
There you go, right there. All right, what are the delegation's viewpoints for how we can continue to improve our technical college system and its local offerings here at Lanier Tech? I added here because that's where we're at, if you don't know.
I'd like to hand the microphone to Tim McDonald, who runs this great organization. Listen, when I decided to run for office, I thought about what is the role of a really great representative at the Capitol. And I thought a really good representative builds tremendous relationships locally with the elected officials, stakeholders, your mayor and council, your county commission, your board of education, your public safety community, your chamber of commerce, your development authority. He understands fundamentally the community backwards and forwards. And then he goes down to the Capitol and he builds really good relationships down there as well. And I believe a good representative should be a fierce advocate for his community. And great examples of really good representation in the past. You can look at Lanier Tech and how I remember when we did the groundbreaking for Lanier Tech many, many years ago, and how that came into being. And so great representation, I think. Long after the representative is gone, there's a legacy that remains and endures that benefits the community for years and decades later. University of North Georgia's campus right here in Forsyth County, Mary Ellen Magruder, and our Chamber of Commerce and our elected officials play such a huge role in working with our delegation at the Capitol. Lanier Tech, the same thing. So inflation is clearly the biggest issue facing most families. I'm not sure it's fully sunk in yet, but what's the countermeasure to inflation? I think it's building a really vibrant local economy here. Our great school system with 50 career pathways is just astounding, helping make sure our kids are job ready, but then continuing education through University of North Georgia and Lanier Tech, so that we have the right kind of programming in place to make sure that not only our young people are ready for an evolving, changing economy, but our grown-ups too, bringing adults, empty nesters back into the workforce, so making sure we have the programming we need. And a big part of being a good representative, I think, is getting down to the Capitol and trying to bring those critical resources back to our community so that our community can thrive.
Thank you, Carter. You kind of touched on this one, but I'm going to ask it anyhow, in case somebody else wants to. As a nation and Georgia's workforce continues to evolve, what should be done at the Capitol to be competitive with other states?
I'll jump in on this one. One of the main topics that they've been, they being Senate leadership, UGA, the Government Affairs Training Program at the Carl Vinson Institute, that they've been cramming into our three brains, trying to get up to speed, is making sure that the workforce development that we're looking at for the future matches what the jobs are going to be. That we're not trying to steer children, our teens, our future into pursuing programs that are not going to be there in 5-10 years from now. And so it's trying to forecast that. What are those needs going to be? Are they in tech? Are they in manual? Are they, is there something else that can be done? To your point about, technical colleges, those tech degrees can be just as competitive as, 4-year or master's degrees. It's just finding the right path and really digging into that. So, Lauren addressed 9 years of being the #1 state to do business. It is workforce development. It is technology, but it's also education. And that's something I know that Greg and Todd have poured themselves into, Todd especially, on the education portion. But when we have, and it doesn't really affect us here in Forsyth, but we get outside of the metro area, when 1 in 3 public schools are failing, we have to be able to reach down to those failing programs as well and try to bring them up to the standards that we have here.
Thank you. It's after questions like this, I'm always proud to say, I'm a Forsyth County I'm a South Forsyth graduate, and that is my highest level of education formally. I'll put my education up against anybody, but I did it myself. So let's move on. In lieu of the failure of T-SPLOST, how do you feel about the formation of CIDs or other methods of funding for transportation projects? There's also a two-parter. How do you see the state roads being improved without that funding mechanism?
Good. I'll come back to you. I'll just speak to the CID piece for a second. I do not believe the CIDs, the primary purpose of CID, should be for large-scale infrastructure funding. First of all, what is a CID? It's Community Improvement District, right? It's a self-taxation business district. So my business where my commercial property is within the South Forsyth CID that we passed 3 years ago. The South Forsyth CID has an approximately $800,000 annual budget. You're not going to move the needle very much on large-scale infrastructure projects with $800,000 a year. The closest thing that I could point to that would, I guess, be a touch point for what we all know as CID to be is the North Fulton CID. Our colleague, Senator Brandon Beach, is actually the chairman of the North Fulton CID. The reason their interchanges look better than ours is because of the CID. So you drive up 400, you see the landscape medians along Georgia 400. When you drive down Windward Parkway, you see beautifully tree-lined streets. That's all funded by the CID. I think that should be the primary purpose of CIDs, and that the large-scale infrastructure funding should be left to the counties and the states. That being said, given the infrastructure funding change, I guess, in the outlook due to the T-SPLOST failure, we need to continue to advocate. We've seen record investment over the last 7 years in Forsyth County from the state. Senator Gucci and I were in the governor's office 2 weeks ago with the chief of staff and deputy chief of staff, lieutenant governor, advocating for specific transportation projects in Forsyth County, namely State Route 306, the second phase of Post Road, the widening of Georgia 400, all things that we need to see. And what they pointed out to us and reminded us is, A, we have the GDOT funding that can happen. But then there's also the federal infrastructure funding that's still yet to come from the feds that that this administration will appropriate. So all is not lost. We obviously know what the most important needs are. The county has a great transportation list, and we are going to work diligently to continue seeing the next $1 billion of funding come on top of the $1 billion of funding that we've seen happen here over the last decade.
Thank you. Representative Jones, what are some of the major initiatives you will lead as chairman of the Appropriations Education Subcommittee? What are some of the major initiatives you will lead as chairman of the Appropriations Education Subcommittee?
Well, I really would like to just highlight one, maybe highlight the second one, but I think there's something to be thinking about as you think about K-12 around our state. There's 180 school districts, 159 counties, obviously we have some citywide school districts. Right now, they are sitting on combined nearly $6 billion in reserves. The state of Georgia, like Leader Gooch said, we currently have a little over 6, but by statute, we can only do 15. Operating budget is around 32. So that's surplus 4.6, 4.7. So when we talk about quote rebating back, and I know Representative McDonald said that, and I know Leader Gooch said that, we're going to go ahead and take out of that surplus and also cover off what we've been doing in terms of the abatement of the fuel excise tax. But in terms of a major initiative in K-12 that folks haven't heard about, it's one that I'm super proud of, and I hope that you are too, because Forsyth County has played a huge role in it. About 2 or 3 years ago, I'm sitting down with Dr. Bud Peterson, who had just left as the Georgia Tech president, or maybe he was about to leave the Georgia Tech president. And I asked him a very simple question. How many kids south of Macon have been admitted into the university, meaning Georgia Tech? And he said, what do you mean? I go, well, notwithstanding the salutatorian and valedictorian program, for those of you who don't know, Georgia Tech admits all salutatorian and valedictorians. Take them out. How many were admitted into Georgia Tech? 0. I'll say that one more time. 0. Are we suggesting that the kids below Macon aren't capable of Georgia Tech? And I understood the conundrum that he and the admissions committee had. They don't have access, and they don't have rigor. So how do we know? Can they handle the curriculum? Can they handle absolutely what Georgia Tech is all about and why it's basically one of the best, if not the best, technical universities in the country? So that got my mind thinking, and we thought, you know what? We have to provide access and rigor. And access and rigor is not going to happen by luring teachers down to South Georgia. Trust me, there's not enough money in the world probably to give them enough, I'll say, incentive to move down there permanently. And so the idea was, could we teach out of Metro Atlanta the children, quote, south of Macon, are in rural Georgia? And so I went to Dr. Bearden, those you don't know, that's the superintendent of Forsyth County Schools, and also the superintendent of Cherokee. And I said, any chance if we funded a pilot, meaning we, the state, funded a pilot that effectively put the teachers here, but the students down there, would you be willing to jump and do this? And kudos to both of them. They jumped in and said, absolutely. We simultaneously created a pilot where Georgia Tech created a train the trainer on computer science. Senator Dolezal talked about that, was it last year, 0.5% got computer science? 3 years ago. We can't have that at 0.5% in terms of children getting computer science credit, because by law, by the mid-2020s, they have to have that in order to graduate. So we have 2 successive pilots going on funded through appropriations of the state. One where we were the teacher and providing that education, and another one where we were doing a train the trainer to enable teachers in rural Georgia, northern Georgia, mountain Georgia, etc. This is the first year we've done the pilot. Close to 1,000 kids combined. We see that tick rate going up literally nearly every week, and we expect to be able to expand that not just within computer science, but also within all STEM and foreign language classes, because getting Mandarin in rural Georgia, getting German in rural Georgia, getting physics and chemistry, it should not be by birthright that my kids have to go to South Side, where frankly it's like a cornucopia of options, and yet the child in Ware County doesn't have a fraction of what my child has. So this pilot is proving that without raising your tax dollars, we can move access and rigor through technology and really make a marked difference in our state and lift everyone up in all 180 school districts.
That's awesome. Very cool. All right, Georgia, we're going to do this question and we're going to have some audience participation. So wake your neighbor up if they're not paying attention. Georgia was in the news a lot in 2020 regarding how our elections were run. As a result, many changes were put in place, starting with the Georgia Elections Integrity Act of 2021. This is a law that was heavily criticized in the national media. Last month was the first real big test for that law. What are the early assessments of how the law impacted our processes?
We may be clamoring for the microphone on this one. Because I think that there was a lot of frustration for those that were involved in the process of passing Senate Bill 202. And really the precursor for me for this was the COVID battle. And if you'll allow me 90 seconds to indulge you on this, when we reopened the state of Georgia, when Governor Kemp reopened the state of Georgia, he became the subject of late night fodder. There were articles in, I think it was The Atlantic, that said that Georgia is conducting an experiment in human sacrifice. And you heard all sorts of incredible hyperbole around the necessary step that we took in balancing lives and livelihood. I went to the Senate floor last year and asked a very simple question, and that is, when does Governor Kemp get his apology? Because the dishonest media, and I get passionate about this, so forgive me for a second, but the way that dishonest media handled the COVID reopening in Georgia is the same way that dishonest media handled election reform in the state of Georgia. And I will ask the same question when I get to the Senate floor next year, is when does Georgia get its apology? Because what we saw after we passed Senate Bill 202, which put radical things in place, such as requiring an ID to vote in Georgia, or locking drop boxes behind closed doors during non-business hours, took a radical step that was highly controversial of not allowing people dressed in campaign attire to walk the lines at election places and pass out water while they were campaigning. In other words, keeping the campaign line sacrosanct as it relates to the voting line as it relates to campaigning. We did all sorts of other crazy things, like requiring people to tell us how many ballots were outstanding at 10 o'clock on election night. And we saw the President of the United States, as well as other nationwide leaders, try to tie that to some of the dark history in this county that it had nothing to do with. Well, what happened as a result of our Jim Crow 2.0 legislation is we saw not only record turnout among Republicans in the May primary, we saw record turnout among Democrats in the May primary. We broke record after record after record in the November election, only to be eclipsed finally on election day with record voter turnout. We saw it repeatedly in the November runoff. In the runoff that we just had in December. Runoffs, which historically have very, very low turnout, we saw record high turnout. So what Governor Kemp said when we passed Senate Bill 202, it became very accurate. And that is that we were trying to do two things in the state of Georgia. We were trying to make it easier to vote and harder to cheat. And somehow that was twisted. But the vindication came not only in May, but in November and then in the runoff. And Georgia has passed really, really good election reform. There are some things that we're going to continue to see as it relates to elections we need to do moving forward. But it was a fantastic step in the right direction. And shame on the politicians from Washington, D.C. to come down here and try to call it something that wasn't.
I think that was very well stated. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Anybody else need to talk about that? All right. Now it's your turn. So what we're going to do is, just like we did before, you'll text James McCoy. I mean, if you hadn't already done it, text James McCoy 350 to 22333. And I'm going to ask you a question. It's going to be multiple choice. You're going to respond with a letter so that we can figure out the most, it's a poll, figure out the most popular answer. So the question is, don't answer anything until I give you all the letters. The question is, what issue do you think will define the 2023 legislative session? Is it A, I guess type A for reducing congestion / transportation, type B for education / workforce development, type C for reducing taxes, and type D for securing elections? That's all up there for you to see. proud that my initiative this year as board chair was workforce development. I'm pointed in the right direction. Awesome. So I don't know if y'all can see this from where you're seated, delegation, but the by far the education workforce development has 50% of the respondents. We got about 30-ish% on congestion transportation. Everybody is really happy with their taxes, and taxes and election are both under 10%. So we got workforce development at 53 currently, reducing congestion transportation at 31. So to the delegation, which issues will you champion next session?
I would like to speak on this. So education and workforce, obviously transportation as well. Living here since 1996, we've seen a lot of incredible development. UNG has done a fantastic job and just really transforming what education looks like in the state. Ben Gerard right here and I have built a pretty strong friendship, and congratulations on your new role. Well deserved. One of the pieces that has struck me being in the world of mechanical contractors, mechanical engineers, architects, electricians, plumbers, is the workforce. And we have a significant need and shortage within these areas. And Lanier Tech is doing a fantastic job in apprenticeships, as we spoke about earlier. It is HVAC contractors, pipe fitters, all these positions need to be filled, not just in that, but the amount of money that kids are making coming out of high school is significantly more than what most people even would believe. In some instances, they'll start out at $50,000, $60,000, sometimes $70,000, and it could go up from there. Just the past couple of weeks, we were with the auto dealers here in Forsyth, and the starting pay for those individuals working in the mechanic industry as well tied into computer chips, it could be $50,000 to $100,000 a year. These numbers are impactful. We need the students in our schools, and I'm going to compliment the Board of Education and Valerie Lowe and Dr. Bearden with Career Pathways and the pieces that they're putting together. But we have to find alternatives than just going to University of Georgia, which is Representative Jones is the school up in Athens for you Gator fans. But I'm a strong proponent of that. With that, cyber security, natural resources, utilities, EV, all the technologies that are there, our greatest threat is cyber attacks. There is a 700,000 employee shortage across the United States for cybersecurity. We need people to go in this industry. I personally want to see civilian cyber companies in North Forsyth, and that's something that I've been working on with Ben Gerard, University of North Georgia, and the Israeli Consulate General's office. So that's something that I would like to see move forward as well.
Can I pick you off of that? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carter. And I'll pick back off you.
I don't know if you can feel it. It's almost palpable what's going on in Forsyth County. We're doing things so well, and you get a sense that things are just about to click into place between our schools. I'd use an expression on the campaign trail a lot, and in business. Talk to me like you're talking to a 12-year-old. Well, yesterday we went to a 5th grade class to listen to a presentation on robotics and technology. I thought, I'm going to have to revise that expression because these are 5th graders. And I was so impressed with the quality of the students we're cranking out in our school system. And I, when I got in Forsyth County, 1990, there were 45,000 people here. Today, there are 265,000. You think just to maintain the quality of something when you're growing that quickly would be astounding in itself. But we're not maintaining, we're growing by leaps and bounds, getting better every year. Recently, someone was kind of frustrated about the school system, and everybody, I think, agrees. It doesn't matter what party you're in or whatever, we need to get politics out of education. But they were frustrated, and I said, well, can you tell me something good about the school system? I said, oh yeah, the academics are fantastic. My kids will learn how to fly an airplane this year at Alliance Academy. Wow, that's pretty forward thinking. Between our career pathways in our high schools, between University of North Georgia, the fact that your children can go to University of North Georgia and Linear Tech and get an associate's degree to college before they ever graduate from high school is astounding. And when you look at the programming and the things that Linear Tech is offering, and there was a great program at Biennial in Athens about workforce development. And I'm looking at Forsyth County, I'm thinking, gosh, we're almost the poster child for workforce development and the things that our Chamber of Commerce is doing, and Valerie Lowe is bringing through the pathway. It's just astounding. Sometimes we take it for granted how special our community really is. And this didn't just happen by accident. You don't just fall into this. This is planning and thinking and thoughtful deliberation over decades that brought us to where we are. I just have to salute everybody that we've just mentioned, because we're doing such a great job here. And I think it's just going to be astounding what you see in the next 12 or 24 months in Forsyth County.
I just want to piggyback on something Brent was saying. On the cyber side, you'll probably see legislation come out of the Senate this year. I'm working with Jason Advitarte, who's our Majority Caucus chairman, on some cyber legislation that will model legislation we've seen come out of Florida. It is the current battlefield, not only here within the states, but internationally as well. And the technical college system thing and the workforce development thing, I want to ask, language is important, and ultimately language shapes culture. And I'm wondering if y'all can join me in something I've tried to do personally. Can we stop asking 17-year-olds when they meet somebody that's a junior or senior in high school, where are you going to college? Because we're reinforcing over and over again as parents and leaders, when we do that, that somehow that's the only next logical step. So a simple thing I've done is just reframe my language as, what's going to be next for you after high school? And I think that we as leaders in this community, especially in this community, because let's be honest, oftentimes the four-year degree for a child is more of a badge of honor for the parent than it is a necessity and the right choice for the child. If we begin to elevate the entrepreneurship that can happen with these high career pathways that we have coming out of places just like this, or quite frankly, if we can begin to elevate the idea that maybe you can go straight into the workforce. I own a technology company, we employ about 30 programmers. One of our most talented programmers who can program circles around people that we have to Georgia Tech, you name this, the technical college they went to, we hired him straight out of high school. So I think that the next generation, we can begin to see a shift, and we can take part in leading that shift and beginning to decentralize the focus on the four-year degree, which is not the right choice for some percentage of our students. I don't know what the percentage is, but I think that we have students who face this massive expectation to make a choice that may not be the right choice for them. And I think that we can be the leaders to shift that a little bit.
I'm just going to jump in on the bottom two, because we've addressed the top two issues. I'm going to address the bottom two briefly. Our state budget is over $30 billion a year, and 3/4 of that is already allocated for two things: education and healthcare. So several of us, Greg, myself, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, we campaigned very heavily on trying to reduce, ultimately eliminate state income tax. What does that mean? How do you replace that income? How do we become more competitive with states like Florida and Texas, Tennessee? So those are things that we're going to be looking at. Because we have been so fiscally conservative, we have built up great reserves. Great reserves allow you to look at ways to incrementally dial that down a little bit. The former Gwinnett County Commissioner used to have a great expression. She called it deliberate incrementalism, where you can just very slowly start to bring things down. And I think that makes us a bit more competitive. On the issue of elections, if you know anything about me, you know that I've been kind of involved in that for a while. And I believe that there are a lot of folks in our community, in our state, that even though we've seen the results of SB 202, people just have an inherent distrust of where things are. And so even though I think that we're all very happy that Governor Kemp got reelected, that we're all sitting up here, Not every election goes the way we want it to. And anybody that wants to talk offline about, the Senate runoff or anything, I'm happy to off mic, but there are a lot of things from a polling standpoint that happened and didn't happen. Bottom line was turnout. But as it really impacts election reform, SB 202 did a lot. We have found a few areas that I think could instill greater confidence. And so for that 7% that's lingering out there, that is their top priority. There are a lot of us that are going to be coming into the legislature that are still very focused on that too.
All right, we've got a few more pre-submitted questions I'll get back to that I've not pre-read, so hopefully this goes well. I'm surprised they let me do this, actually. To combat skyrocketing fuel prices, Governor Kemp has suspended Georgia's fuel tax 6 times this year. That tax is the funding mechanism for the Georgia Department of Transportation's aggressive long-term transportation issues. How will the suspension of this tax affect GDOT and the future project?
It won't. Yeah.
Very quickly, it's costing us circa 125 to 175 million. We're pulling off the reserve.
Per month.
Oh, per month, I apologize, thank you. 125 to 175 million a month in order to effectively abate the excise tax. We're pulling that out of the reserves to cover that. So in terms of moving forward, the DOT will have 100% of its funding.
$6 billion.
But they're also probably, first of the year, we're probably going to go back, bring the tax back. This is probably the last month that he'll be doing the tax, because we've got to get back to business.
Stockpile now. All right, so there's been talk of legalizing casino gambling and sports betting in the state for years. We're also seeing a lot of sports-related economic development projects being considered all across Georgia. How close is legalized betting in Georgia to becoming a reality?
Brandon, you know Brandon, so I got to let you, that's you and Brandon.
Both of those issues didn't get across the finish line again last year. I suspect you'll see efforts to get them across the finish line again this year. And I can't predict the future, but that they will continue to remain hot topics.
All right. For all of you who were part of the last session of the General Assembly, what legislation were you involved in that didn't make crossover day that you expect to be picked up at the upcoming session?
Come on, Gooch. Gooch, you've been quiet.
Try to stay quiet. I can't even remember what we had for breakfast yesterday, let alone what legislation didn't pass. I felt like I got everything passed that I needed to get passed. I will say that some of the big issues that we're facing going forward is going to be in the area of transportation funding, not only for our roads in North Georgia, but primarily for freight logistics. As you all know, we have the #1 busiest airport and the busiest port down in Savannah and the Brunswick area. And all that trade coming in and out of our country, coming through Savannah, is coming up through Georgia, on into South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama, and different parts of the country, Tennessee. And we're seeing that congestion. If you drive down into Atlanta and south on 75, you get down to Henry County, McDonough, you see a choke point. There's several of those choke points. There's one at the northwest corner of the state too, going into Chattanooga. So there's 3 or 4 places where we're seeing tremendous congestion. 285 corridor. These are projects that are going to require billions and billions of dollars to fix. And the longer we put that off, the harder it's going to be to come up with a solution. I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the Georgia 400 project. So I think we may run out of time shortly. I want to make sure you understand what's about to happen. Next spring, DOT will be issuing a contract sometime between April and late summer to investor group that's going to build 4 more lanes on Georgia 400, 2 northbound and 2 southbound, starting just inside the perimeter below the 285 interchange. And there'll be express lanes, and they'll come all the way up into this area, just a little north of McFarland Road. And those will be primarily express lanes that you and I can get on if we want to get into Atlanta quicker. It's not going to cost us to use it if we don't want to use it. If you want to get on that lane, you'll have to pay that very fare, just like you do on 75 north and 75 south. Those are the kinds of things that we're working on behind the scenes that are coming forward. The state will have to invest close to $1 billion for that project, for this 400 express lane project. The rest of the money, which will be several billion other dollars, will be private equity money that will be brought in from these contractors that are in negotiations as we speak. So that's a big deal. And we're going to have to do more of that around the state. We have to do truck lanes. We have to look at other options on how to move freight through our state. And we're also going to have to help the Class 1 railroads that are in the state. So you're going to see efforts in the next 2 years in the General Assembly to try to find some dedicated funding for that freight logistics network and for more infrastructure, more transportation. We're making a lot of progress with congestion relief in Georgia, but not nearly as fast as we like. And we're going to need billions and billions of dollars to fix that problem, because we continue to grow at a faster rate than we're fixing the problem. So that's one of the issues, and I think you'll hear more about this next time. Can I build off of that?
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Leader Gooch. I think one of the other things we need to be thinking about is this. First, when you think of transportation and transportation modalities, you're thinking about effectively a diversified portfolio. And the very first autonomous commercial vehicle will come out of the Port of Savannah early next year. And I know there's only one, but it is, at least we're tipping the iceberg. And yes, some people will think, you know what, it's going to take decades before we have the autonomous vehicles on the road and can scale. I would argue that in terms of the commercial fleet, I think you're going to see AV come up much faster than I'm going to say the personal fleet. So that's another way that we're going to help with, I'll say, congestion. We're going to be one of the states that will lead the way, speaking of Silicon Valley, the East, lead the way on AV as opposed to high front. The second thing is just keep this in mind. There's a study committee on it this year. There'll be probably a lot more conversations inside the Gold Dome in 2023 and 2024 on this, but there's an argument to be made that we've hit peak fuel, meaning when you think about how DOT is funded through the excise tax. More and more you're seeing what? Hybrids, a lot more hybrids, diesel, EV, you're going to see hydrogen, etc. So at some point you're going to start seeing the demand curve basically, instead of go upper right, it's going to go lower right. And how is it that we're going to replace that funding? So that's something that's going to be a challenge for all of us to be able to put that mechanism in, I'll say today, and today could be 12 months from now, so that people understand both inside of Georgia and outside of Georgia what it's going to mean in terms of our ability to continue to fund the projects that we should be referring to.
I think the other major issue that's going to come up, that's going to be a huge fight for you and your families, is going to be school choice. That was a major topic for this part of the district, and I don't think there's any question in our mind that those of us that were huge advocates for that over the last year, we're really disappointed to see that not get across the finish line, but I think that's going to be coming up really soon once we get called back in session.
Thank you. We're going to do 2 more questions. So do you have an update on the Purdue opioid settlement? Georgia's getting $636 million from that. Will you fight for Forsyth County's fair share given our opioid crisis? Gotcha. We don't have enough information to answer that one right now. All right, we're going to end on this one. It may be for Representative McDonald. How will the UGA football game affect the opening of the legislative session?
Well, there's already a lot of plans in place. We got to win first the week before, and I feel confident that Buckeyes are going to wish they never came down to Atlanta. But when we win, I think it might be a short day. There's so many people, if you ride around Georgia right now, that you see all these California tags. I'm going to go to California that day, and I'm going to get the hell back out. And after bringing home the natty again 2 years in a row. So go Dogs. You ought to see some of my diddling up here. I've got Florida Gators or Swamp People. Go Dogs. We diddle a little bit up here and jab each other. So it's our early mornings when Todd's in the room in our little breakfast club. He's on an island by himself with a lot of dogs. But it is a good group. A lot gets done. We learn a lot being from Forsyth County from our rural Georgia friends. But again, I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to represent not only District 26, but all of Forsyth County.
To try to answer the question. Constitutionally, we're required to be in office that day. We're required to be sworn in. So on the second Monday of January, the 6 of us will be on the floor in the House and Senate. Will be sworn in, the senators and state representatives. The governor, however, will not be sworn in until Thursday of that week. So he has decided to put the inauguration off until Thursday because of some of the activities that Representative McDonald has alluded to. I will be in Atlanta that day. I may watch the game somewhere in Atlanta that night, but we'll be at work on Monday, the 9th of January. And we encourage you to come to that. The public is welcome to attend those ceremonies. They'll be in the gallery. There'll be seating in the gallery in both the House and Senate chambers. We will be working on Tuesday. There won't be a lot done after swearing in. Tuesday and Wednesday may or may not be session days. We haven't decided that yet. There will be other activities, though. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce has its Days and Issues breakfast that week. So we encourage you to come and participate in that as well. So hope that answers the question. Thursday, the governor and all constitutional officers will be sworn in Atlanta. There will be an inaugural ball that evening as well.
Thank you. What is the old saying, with great power comes great responsibility, or something like that? I don't know what the saying is, but for my friends out there who know what this means, just work with me here. OH. There we go. All right. My family's all from Columbus, Ohio. I had to be a traitor. So
I feel like that went over about as well as your suit did in that video.
the one guy, I knew he was out there. Yeah. Senator Dolezal, will you please share some info about us, about the Less Crimes Act and the session that's happening this week?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll keep this quick, but we have a really unique opportunity in Forsyth County to come alongside law enforcement and the great work that they do. We passed a bill, maybe some of this sounds, no, it's not. We passed a bill last year that basically allows individuals to get a dollar-for-dollar tax credit for money you give to your local law enforcement foundation. It also allows C Corps to get a dollar-for-dollar tax credit for money that they give to the local law enforcement foundation. We're on a time crunch here, though. Why? Why are we on a time crunch? It's a $75 million statewide allocation, but a $3 million foundation limit. So with over 175 law enforcement agencies in the state of Georgia, if we want to maximize Forsyth County's $3 million allotment, we need to get our commitments in day one. How does it work? You would go into the Georgia Tax Center website on January 1st and make a commitment. Married couples can donate up to $10,000. Single filers can donate up to $5,000. C Corps, this is where it could get really good for us really quick, can donate up to 75% of their Georgia state income tax liability. What happens once you do that is you have 60 days to donate the money. You then receive a dollar-for-dollar tax credit from the state of Georgia, from the $75 million that we appropriated to this program. So it literally costs you nothing. And it might cost you time value of your money because you have to float it. But if you make estimated payments, you could adjust your estimated payments to reflect that to where it literally would cost you nothing. So the sheriff's annual budget is, I believe, right around $60 million, Sheriff, is that correct? So we have the opportunity to come alongside with supplemental funding here locally. And the way that I think of this is my family can either send $10,000 down to Atlanta to let these elected officials decide what they're going to do with it, or we can keep it here locally. And I know what my family's going to do with the money. We're going to keep it here locally. A couple of things I want you to think about that the sheriff shared with me. Our deputies currently have vests that will stop bullet fire, but will not stop rifle fire. And one thing that he has said that he will look at doing with this money is providing those upgraded vests to the people that need it, especially to our SROs who are in our schools. And so if I didn't just sell you on this program right there, I'll tell you about the next thing. We have men and women who are part of the SWAT team that put their lives on the line, get extra training, extra education, and they're the first to arrive on the scene when something like the courthouse shooting happens. Do you know how much money the department is able to pay them extra as a supplement for being part of SWAT? $0. Sheriff has said part of what he looks to do with this money, if we can get the full $3 million funded, is provide stipends to SWAT. We can provide continuing education for deputies who go on to receive additional training. So what's the ask? The ask is very simple, is that you as a family will look at your personal finances, look at your 2021 state income tax liability and figure out what it is. If it's $6,000, I'm going to ask you to give $6,000 to the Forsyth County Sheriff's Heroes Foundation. And then we as a state, ultimately you as a state, will give that money right back to you when you file your Georgia tax returns. The other big ask would be if you are a C-level executive or no C-level executives at C corporations, we would love to go meet with them, because organizations like that are based here, like the Home Depot, for example, could take a pretty big swing at knocking down that $3 million for Forsyth County. And what I pitched when I pitched this to those executives is, and Kelly Whitmire from Forsyth County News is here, we'd be more than happy to do a press release and a press conference talking about how generous you were to the Forsyth County Sheriff's Department with your $100,000 donation from Georgia Power, Jeff. And we're not going to tell anybody that the state's giving you all that money back. So it's a great opportunity to stand aside law enforcement, both as a family, but as an entity. And ultimately, the state of Georgia is going to give you that money back. So thanks for the opportunity to share about that program. And we're doing an event Friday morning for business owners at the South Forsyth. Actually, Ron, is it at Giorgio's? It's at Giorgio's. If you want information on that, just connect with myself and the sheriff after this meeting. We're more than happy to tell you about it.
Thank you. Well, thank all of you for your time and your commitment to our community. We appreciate you, and we appreciate you taking the time this morning to be here for us. And thank all of you as well. I hope you all have a great day and a great holiday season, and we're done. Thank you.
There's a backlog on 501c. So there's only like 35.